The funding for this video is provided by the amazing members of our Patreon. Also contributions from viewers like you. Thank you. Yeah, I started from PBS Kids. What you gonna do? Fight me? Anyway, roll the video.
Do you think the 90s Fresh Prince can get annoying?
Yes, absolutely.
Like, do you ever have a show that you can only really watch in doses? Like, you don't hate the show, you don't dislike it at all, you very much enjoy it, but if you watch too much of it in one sitting, it becomes too unbearable for you? When it comes to animation, that is how I feel about the series named Dexter's Laboratory. What is Dexter's Laboratory, you may ask? I can't believe I have to explain it. Dexter's Laboratory is an animated series created by Jendy Tartakovsky. Oh my gosh, I really hope I pronounced this name correctly because I had to practice it a few times before I turned the camera on. Not made by Craig McCacken. I made a mistake on my podcast where I said Dexter's Lab was made by Craig McCacken, but he worked on Dexter's Lab, so I was part right. But the series is about Dexter, who is a super smart kid who has a secret lab in his house. Like, y'all know how in Moon Girl where Lunella got that secret lab but it's not in her damn apartment complex? Y'all caught that cinematic parallels. Like, Moon Girl's kind of like a modern day Dexter's Laboratory. And so much of Dexter's Laboratory is basically Dexter trying to keep it a secret that he has a lab in the house. But he's also trying to keep his annoying ass sister Dee Dee out of his place because she's always fucking up his experiments. And that's just the entire series. That's just the basis of it, because we did see when Dexter will go to school or go to other events. And there are times in the series where it will focus on Dee Dee and her friends, and then they had these segments that feature adult characters that were superheroes. And then if you guys remember Dial M for Monkey with Agent Honeydew's beautiful ass, the video about her is gonna come soon because I got some opinions. Dexter's Lab, in my opinion, it's a pretty fun show and it has aged well in certain aspects. And when I say that, like I said, Agent Honeydew, we're gonna talk about her another day, because Dexter's Laboratory is a series that has a really big misogyny problem, as many other Cartoon Network series at that time did just as well. As much as I enjoy Dexter's Laboratory, I cannot sit through 90 minutes of this series. I can only handle 90 minutes in one day, and that's enough. Because the characters get too irritating. Because Dexter's Lab came out during a time where binge watching wasn't necessarily a thing. The only time you really got to binge watch Dexter's Laboratory is if you bought the, like, you know, the box set DVD or bought the VHS tape, or when they just played a marathon on television where they played all the episodes. But Dexter's Lab, like I said, it came out at a time where binge watching wasn't necessarily a thing. So you'll see these characters once a day and then that's enough, and then you'll move on. This show is not meant to be sat and watched for 3 hours straight, and that's okay. But recently I have been rewatching a childhood favorite of mine simply because it's a hot topic again. This series has been rebooted from a sitcom into a contemporary dramedy. It's hilarious at times. As much as I enjoy this one particular show right here, I get too annoyed with it and I have to turn it off after 30 minutes. I've been rewatching it, and mind you, this is another 90s show that is not meant to be binge watched, and that series is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. We had to take the tablet out the case because it just didn't want to act right. But I'm gonna just read this part directly from the outline, because y'all not about to get me. I know y'all gonna eat me up for this. I can explain, trust me. I don't want y'all to get the wrong idea about my feelings towards the original series, because I in fact still do love it. Alright? And as I've been rewatching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, mainly it's because I have been watching the new series Bel-Air. Like I said, it is a contemporary, modern day retelling of the past series from the 90s, and it just kind of has me thinking a lot back to it, and I've been feeling a bit nostalgia and I've been going towards it. Mind you, just a heads up, we will only be talking about Bel-Air season 1. We will not be talking about anything in season 2, mainly because I had this video planned strictly before season 2 came out. But as I have been watching Bel-Air, it's been reminding me of why I stopped watching the original one in the first place. Like many other like 90s black sitcoms, sitcoms too. When it comes to The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, it's a series that has done a lot when it comes to the subject of the way blackness is viewed in American cinema, because in the series it's about a wealthy black family that lives in Los Angeles, and if you don't know, that is one of the most expensive cities to live in America, and I'm pretty sure the world in general. But anyway, so that's a bit of a flex for the Banks family. And the show actually does have black writers, and so oftentimes black shows or shows that feature a decent amount of black people in them do not. So that was a big deal in my opinion. And it wasn't just like black men writing the episodes, black women were writing them too, because black women are heavily excluded from the writer's room in Hollywood, and we most definitely can tell. Alright? And also, many of the directors for the series are black. This show introduced hip-hop to a mainstream audience, and when they say mainstream audience, they just really mean white people. The fashion in the series is also to die for. One of my favorite aspects of watching it, or just watching pretty much of anything, is just seeing what kind of outfits they're going to give the characters moving forward. Many of the recurring characters in the series were fun, and if we did not have The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the current state of black TV will most likely look different than what it does now. So I am thankful for this show, along with many other black sitcoms at that time, but also plenty of other black sitcoms around that time period suffer from the same issues as The Fresh Prince. Because black people literally had to fight so hard to get like these jobs within the American film industry, like during the 80s and the 90s. So for them to have numerous black sitcoms airing has like a very strong effect on black cinema today. So for the most part, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air has done good. It has left its mark in many positive ways. And the show ended before I was born, by the way. So it's beloved by so many people who watched it after it ended, because my introduction to the series was watching it when it came on Nick at Night. Do y'all still be watching Nick at Night? Let me know. Let me know, because once Nick at Night started playing Friends marathons all the time, I just said bye. I ain't watching that. No, what kills me about Nick at Night is that there are so many other white people sitcoms that they can play, but they keep playing that one. Play The Office, please, because that slaps. But like I said, it's beloved by many black people and just people in general long after it has ended, because it's mainly just a show about a rich black family doing stuff. And as much as I do love this series, I was always bothered by something with it, like mainly within its characters and the flanderization of them, along with it being pretty obvious that they didn't know what to do with certain characters at various points within the series. Put a pin on that, because we're gonna come back. And then when I started to watch the reboot, as I said, it is a modern day retelling of the series, I started to notice these issues a lot more, and the characters and its main character, specifically Will Smith, the fictional version, are the problem. So hello, we are here on the subject of flanderization. If you're not familiar with what flanderization is, you should be, but then I remember it's been a minute since I talked about it here on this channel. But I think a character that is one of the worst examples of flanderization would have to be London Tipton from The Sweet Life on Deck, because they took her stupidity and put it on 10. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is a series that suffers heavily from flanderization just as well. And for those of you guys who don't know what flanderization is, let's go on over to Urban Dictionary. The process by which a single trait from a character is overstated and brandished to the point where it becomes the character's only trait. Flanderization is almost always from the worst and tends to draw viewers away from the medium that the character represents. So flanderization, it's not just a black sitcom issue in my opinion, it's an all sitcom problem, okay? Because this shit happens quite often in white people's sitcoms just as well, specifically those that came out when The Fresh Prince was airing new episodes too. And as we are back around to the subject of flanderization, remember how I said that Dexter's Laboratory becoming really annoying if you watch too much of it at one sitting? Part of that has to do with when you watch the series in its later seasons, the aspects of the characters go from a 2 to a 10. As they took certain traits with a few characters and they just did too much with them to the point where it just became, I feel like I have been saying annoying and irritating so much in this video, but that's just so much of what it is. It became unbearable. as the dad in the show, who I never liked. He's always been kind of stupid, but he ended up being like a straight idiot in the end. And then they took the mom's cleaning to like an extreme, and then Dexter became more cruel to his sister Dee Dee, and it becomes very uncomfortable to watch. Mind you, like I said, 90s Cartoon Network and early 2000s Cartoon Network had a misogyny problem. But along with how they gave Dee Dee friends, her friends are just like black and Asian copies of her. Mimi and Lily, the names are an issue alone, but they were just Dee Dee 2.0 and Dee Dee 3.0, and they became more annoying and irritating and rambunctious as the series went on. Because we already had one Dee Dee, and then she multiplied. As Dexter's Laboratory's biggest issue with its writing was the flanderization, it's also an issue with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's writing just as well. I say that this happened with a bit of all of the family members, with the exception of Ashley, and I have my issues with Ashley's character. That's another discussion for another time. But there's only 3 characters that I specifically want to focus on for this video because I don't want it to be too damn long. And that would have to be Will, Carlton, and Hilary. And we're gonna go to Hilary first. We're starting with her first because boo! Whoo! So Hilary Banks, in my opinion, is a character that I genuinely did not care for until the reboot, because I like what Bel-Air did with her character versus the original, because aside from her being ditzy, I just found her a bit dull. But I just don't like stupid ditzy characters. I don't like the airhead character. I don't find them funny, and a good 90% of them are rooted in ableism. What made me so frustrated with 90s Hilary is that she had no sense of like awareness, if you ask me. She had no idea what she wanted to do with her life. She had no fucking talent. And if she did not care much about anything up until like a certain point in the series, which I understand because like growth, she was always like spending her parents' money. She didn't know how to do basic things to survive. She had no talent, and I said that again because that is a major factor about her that they changed within the reboot. But it's like the more the show went on, the more confused it felt with what it wanted to do with Hilary. Like at certain points I just felt like they were just ping-ponging on what they could do with her, because it's like when it got to the Trevor arc, that is where Hilary's character peaked, in my opinion. A part of me doesn't really like how they handled Trevor's death in the series, let alone killing him off in general, because this was like a grand moment in the show, and it really kind of didn't make sense for her to barely change personality wise. Like she was still clueless, attitude still nasty, because you know this is one of the shows where the characters age. Hilary was still very much the same to a certain extent when she was about 24, and it just got stale. In my opinion, she was just as frustrating as she was when she was 20. But mind you that Hilary is 20 in the start of the show. And y'all, 20 is such a weird age because none of us know what we were doing, okay? Some of us are close to graduating college. Some of us dropped out of college. Some of us are working in retail and fast food service with nasty ass people. So I get why Hilary feels very lost at this age, because your early 20s are weird. Alright, and I feel like Hilary having like her quarter life crisis is handled much better in the reboot, because Hilary's lack of common sense in the 90s, it became stale, and her actually having awareness in the new one, it's a breath of fresh air. Her lack of common sense just, ooh. Like in the original, she was a full-on airhead that didn't really care too much like at a certain point, and then she started to care a little bit more after Trevor died. But then again, that's a bit of a stretch. In Bel-Air, Hilary is a character I think was fixed perfectly, because here I enjoy her a lot more, and then I also saw that a lot of people like the new Hilary too just as well, because they mentioned that part of the reason they didn't really care too much for Hilary in the 90s was because of her lack of common sense. I like her a lot more here because she has drive to work harder for what she wants in life, and while she's not ignorant, she still is impressionable, because remember, she's in her early 20s. Like, it's obvious that she didn't read the terms and conditions of like that influencer house, but you know, a lot of us don't be reading the terms and conditions. And also, mention how I said she had no talent in the original. Well, she did, but anyway, she can cook here. Like, she's a really talented chef. And she loves to cook, she loves fashion, which is something that I'm glad that they kept for this version of Hilary that they taken from the original. And she enjoys being an influencer, and she puts in the work to make her content for her audience. Like, she's trying to make a name for herself, and she's not so dependent on her family for everything. And as she really wants her family to view her as more mature. Also, editing me here, I need to rant real quick, but 90s Hilary was so ungrateful. Like, that is something that I really just can't stand in general when it comes to characters and them being ungrateful for what their family does for them. Because Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv, they were too easy on her sometimes. They was too nice to her. And you know how she ended up getting a job and all that. And it was like, she don't want this. She saw no issue with her behavior for so long. And it was just, oh, she was just so ungrateful. And I'm happy to see that she did start to do better. Like, she had her own show and all that in the end. But also the way the show treated her in the end of its run, it just was like, okay, we don't care too much for her. We'll just throw her there. But so much of like when Hilary's character felt more of importance, she was just so unlikable to a certain extent. And also, I really like that Hilary is like proving to her family early on in the series that she wants to be taken more seriously as an adult and be seen as more mature. And this is just me personally, but I am somebody that just never really liked the mean characters of series, like especially mean girl characters. That was Hilary in the 90s. She is a lot nicer here in the 2020s, and I deeply appreciate it. And I find mean characters to just be annoying to a certain extent. Like, that's part of the reason why I couldn't get with Monet Dahan from the Gossip Girl reboot, because I found her insufferable because of how mean she was. Maybe it's just because I don't like people like that in real life. In conclusion, Hilary is way less annoying now. I feel like she is a much better sister to Ashley and Carlton here, and a better cousin to Will in the reboot, because in the original, I think she really could have been a lot nicer to her family. And also another thing going back with her family is that I like that she is a lot more honest with them. She's more honest with them, especially when it comes to things that are going on with her personally. Especially that entire arc in the original of Hilary like dropping out of college. But here she is more straightforward. Like, I know the entire situation where she was talking about how she didn't want to tell her parents about the credit card, but I kid you not, that's like a normal thing in your 20s. We all be getting a credit card because we need it, and then we don't tell our parents how much we have to pay off on it. For the most part, the changes in Hilary's character made her one of the most enjoyable things in the reboot for me, as her bits in the show are some of my favorite, which is hilarious because she is the thing that I dislike the most about the original. Carlton. I know a lot of people don't like what this series did to him, but I personally, I like what they did to Carlton here. He actually feels more like a person. Because in the last one, like I said, he was given a Dexter's Laboratory character. Carlton in the 90s was given cartoon. It was very toony. But the changes with Carlton's characters, I feel like it fits a lot more now in this day and age, because there are so many guys out here that are like him. And like, for the most part, as I mentioned how Carlton felt like a cartoon character in the 90s version, he was, oh my gosh, they toned him down a lot more, because in the original he was just straight up like comic relief, and you're not supposed to take him seriously then in the most part until like the later seasons when like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air started doing all like those special episodes. But as I mentioned, like in the 90s, like Carlton literally is like the butt of all the jokes in the series. The whole family mean to him. Carlton's main purpose in the 90s, we have to remember, was to challenge Will, because he was just the complete opposite of him, and then he often get caught up in fuckery because of Will too. But with Carlton in the 90s, the series went on more and more and dragging it out as him like being the nerdy black kid that don't fit in with nobody, which isn't a problem, because trust me, I get it, I understand. But one thing about Carlton in this new one that I don't like, but I can understand why they put this aspect in it. I personally think that we aren't supposed to like drug storylines overall, because the subject of drug use makes us simply uncomfortable, because it's uncomfortable to talk about. As in the original, Carlton, like I said, he's just comic relief. He's just a full-on joke. But here they made him feel like an actual person, but they had to remove so many aspects of him from the original, like him being super duper goofy, and they had to shut it down here to fit more in the world of what this is. And we see that Carlton is kind of like a popular dude, but you know, it's a different type of environment compared to where Will was growing up. And then Will came and kind of like took the throne from him at the school. But we see how Will and him are so different, because we see that Carlton is seen as cool in his environment, as he's like, oh, I have super duper rich parents and I'm smart and I play on the lacrosse team. But Will, on the other hand, I say he's a bit more cool without even trying. Like, he's very into urban culture and whatever the fuck. He dresses different from Carlton. We can see why so many people enjoy Will more here in the reboot than Carlton, because Carlton kind of blends in a lot with the rest of the people at their school. That's why when Will came, they were like, oh, this dude's super duper cool. You just regular smegular and you blend in with everyone. So I can understand why they changed it to this, because that's how it works. But moving forward, as I mentioned that this is the environment that Carlton knows, this is the environment that he has grown up in, we have to take into consideration that there is a lot of things that kids with very privileged parents do opposed to ones that are not. Because as somebody that hung out with rich kids in school and then poor kids too, as we see that Carlton kind of gets caught up in the wrong crowd of kids that are at his school, and I'm pretty sure that this is what led him to be, you know, being a crackhead, abusing drugs. It's honestly really, really sad. And I know part of this has to do with the fact that Carlton does suffer from anxiety, but I'm over here looking like, I think one of the kids at the school had something to do with that shit. Hi, me from the editing room. So I wanted to bring up what I just said about the entire situation with drugs. I am aware that a lot of poor kids be involved in drug use, but also a lot of rich kids be involved with drug use too. But I noticed, as I said, I hung out with so many different types of people growing up. I noticed that there was a bit of a difference when it came to like drug use, because when I was with like the poorer people and they went to like go do drugs or whatnot, it's because they just wanted something to like to ease the pain of whatever they were dealing with, to take their mind off of it or whatnot. But then I noticed when I was with the more privileged kids, they would be like, oh, let's do drugs, this is fun, let's snort this, let's smoke this. Like, it was very different. And a lot of people that grew up around very privileged people, they can attest that a lot of rich kids do drugs. So yeah, that's what I was talking about when I had mentioned that I understood that. So I'll be quiet and let's continue. As I mentioned that Carlton is a crackhead, and I honestly don't really like this aspect about him, let's bring some nuance to it, because this is a result of Carlton hanging out with the wrong people. And y'all heard the saying, don't let your white friends get you in trouble. That is Carlton in the series. That literally is him. He literally is the little token black kid that hangs out with a whole bunch of non-black children, all rich, but guess what? When y'all get in trouble, who they looking at? The black child. Trust me, I understand it, because if I'm out with my white friends, I'm gonna make sure I deal, because I'm like, hey, if y'all end up doing something that's suspicious, I'm leaving, because I know I'm gonna get in trouble first. And while Carlton just felt like a giant joke in the original, that honestly is kind of all that he was, and they wanted to do more with him later on in the series. I mentioned that he just didn't feel like an actual person, and here Carlton feels more human now, because they just gave him a personality outside of being the nerd no one wants to talk to that dances funny. So the fix they did with Carlton, I like it overall, because he feels real now. And also, that scene of him running through the studio screaming in the original will never not be funny. Yes, it was on the other day, and I watched the entire thing. Will, where do we begin? Will, in the 90s, he is more unbearable than Hilary and Carlton put together. That's how much of a nuisance he is. I like to do this thing where like I play around with like certain like shows and like movies and books that I watch. I will be like, this show is just so and so making bad decisions for like 22 minutes or whatever. And like with my AU that I've been writing, I'm like, this story is literally 2 hours of Natalie making bad decisions, because that's literally what it is. Because it's like the more you read the story, you're like, girl, what are you doing? But when I say that is how you feel when you are watching the original Fresh Prince. When I tell you, Will is so damn hard-headed, he is. And I personally can understand why Uncle Phil had such a difficult time dealing with him. At certain points in the series, I felt bad for Uncle Phil because he didn't know how to deal with him. But I get how Uncle Phil was irritated because I had a hard time watching it. He never learned much of anything. And like, what killed me the most, and the purpose of Will in this series moving from Philly to Los Angeles is to become a better person and be in a safer environment. And sometimes you really got the impression that he didn't want to be there because he didn't behave. Like, it was one thing about him being like a bad influence on the Banks kids. I get that. But it's also what this series did with Hilary. What this show did to Hilary, they did to Will just as well. How they made him amazingly idiotic so much. And I wouldn't say that Will is like a ditchy, stupid character like Hilary is, but so many of the decisions he made, it's just like, are you acting before you're thinking? He had no self-awareness whatsoever until he went to college and got with Lisa, and even that's a stretch. That storyline with Lisa is just another can of worms with Excel. But here's like a brief breakdown of what the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is. There will be an episode where Will does something bad. He learns what he did was bad. And he's like, okay, I learned my lesson. But then he doesn't learn the lesson, because in the next episode, we'll see that he's back doing fuckery. And we ate it up every single time. And because the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is just like 22 minutes of Will making bad decisions and not learning much from anything, it's like he got worse the more it went on. Because they were finding new ways for him just to make bad decisions. And one aspect of Will that bothered me the most is that he could be really, really loud. And there was like so much shouting with him, and the more it went on, it becomes a headache. And it's funny how the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air presents itself as a coming-of-age tale of Will Smith, but he didn't come of age all that well. Came where? Because at the last time I checked, he low-key's back where he started. I remember there was an entire arc in the series where he most likely was not even going to graduate high school. And I understand it, I get it, he's young and we were all stupid at that age, but so much of it is just like, so many people would kill to be in the position that you were in. My poor ass would have loved to go live with my uncle and auntie in Bel-Air. I would have made the most of it. I swear, you would have never caught me in trouble, ever. And like I said, this is supposed to be his coming of age story, and not to sound boring, but the show gets nerve-wracking after a while because of so much yelling he does. And on top of the fact that he just keeps messing up and not learning. So an episode of The Fresh Prince goes like this. Will gets involved with doing something he's not supposed to be doing, and then Uncle Phil gets onto him about it, and it gets scary from time to time, because when Uncle Phil got angry, he got angry, all right? And sometimes I would have to look away from the screen because I would just be getting like the secondhand embarrassment. Like, I would be feeling like that man was yelling at me. And overall, Uncle Phil's character is one that has many, many issues with fat phobia. Because one thing in the series I never really like is how the family always kind of made fun of his weight, and his weight ended up having him resulted with him having health issues. But aside from that, it became draining after a while watching this man who has his own problems become stressed out by his nephew who he wants to do better but doesn't. And at times, it felt as if Will was being ungrateful for all that the Banks did for him. But in this reboot, I don't feel that way. Like, he's thankful, he's appreciative, and he shows it. He's not rude to the family, because he's still rude to Carlton though, because Carlton be deserving it. But the rest of them, respectful. And I kid you not, sometimes it looks like they wanted to smack Will because of the shit that he was saying about them, but we don't have that here. And he's also not extremely loud here. Thank you, I get it. The only time he was really loud was in that last episode when he was shouting at his daddy. Oh my god, that scene was painful to watch. They acted their asses off there, okay? But here he also listens to people. I think he is a much better partner to Lisa here than he was then, which is sad because he's older when he got with Lisa than he is here. And like, trust me, Will still be making bad decisions in this one, but It's not like he's constantly in trouble. Like, Will has good intentions, but then he doesn't go about them in the best ways because he's a lot kinder. Will in the original was an overall bad person. Here, we can see that he's decent, but still has a lot to work on. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is a sitcom. Bel-Air is a dramedy. So of course there's going to be differences with the way the characters are portrayed to a certain extent. The characters become more unbearable in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air because it's a sitcom, but also specifically it's a sitcom that came out in the 90s. TV back then is so much different than how TV is now. Like, even with watching sitcoms that have come out within the last decade are different in terms of character development, because in the 90s there was no such thing as streaming. If you wanted to stream, like I said, you bought a box set DVD and you watched it. At least I don't know there was streaming in the 90s. If there was, comment down below, because I really don't think there was. But back then, and like I'd say the 2000s too, if you missed one episode, you missed it. And I understand this because I was watching Avatar: The Last Airbender when the episodes was coming out, and I missed one whole episode and I was lost. I was so lost. I had to figure it out on my own, like putting points together. It was bad, especially because I missed the episode where Ty Lee and May were introduced. So I was so damn confused when they popped up in the series. I was like, who is this person? But as I said, if you missed the episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air back in the day, you just missed it. And because of that, because TV was so different then, the next episode that would air that you would watch needed to have the same setup as the last, so you wouldn't be confused on who, what, when, and where. I kid you not, Dexter's Laboratory would get dragged if it came out in this day and age because of how bothersome it got. I kid you not. And also, in the later end of Dexter's Laboratory, it became so unfunny because it just felt like they were pulling everything out of their ass for humor. And it got to a point where you just simply wanted to turn it off and did not care how the episode ended. Like, I know y'all be talking about Dexter's brew removal, like, oh my gosh, haha, Dexter did curse, it's so funny. It's not funny. I had to turn it off after 3 minutes. But also, before the flanderization that took place with Dexter's Laboratory, you still can't sit there and binge watch it. Y'all talk about Dee Dee is annoying. Dexter was too. Like, if we gonna drag Dee Dee, we need to drag her brother too. Drag them both. Because this show, I can only handle 22 minutes of Dexter's Laboratory because 90 minutes is a stretch. Because Dexter's and Dee Dee's fighting, it's funny after a while, but then when at a certain point, it's like, okay, that's enough of you two. The corner, both of you. But that is also because TV was so different back then. Dexter's Laboratory is a series that is made to where you can watch it at any moment and won't be confused. Because of the way it's set up, it's not set up for you to have to watch all of it to understand it. Same with The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But here's the thing with Dexter's Laboratory. There wasn't really much of an ongoing storyline. It was just Dexter's making stuff and his experiments going wrong. And even when the show focused on other characters that weren't Dexter and Dee Dee, like when they did the episodes with the adults in it. Honestly, that is my favorite part of the series now that I have rewatched the show now that I'm grown. I really like the segments with the adult superheroes and all that. That ate, and I high-key wish that it got its own show because I would have watched it. Did it have its own show and I was unfamiliar? But as I said, even when Dexter's Lab focused on other characters, you weren't lost. And even though with The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, while you can jump in at any time and watch it, there is an ongoing story. There are many different arcs that take place with it that play out over a few days. When it comes to a sitcom, you kind of have to have the basics for all the episodes so it doesn't feel too much like a change, which is why it felt like there was barely any character development for anyone in the long run. Dexter's Laboratory is not a series where character development is important, nor does it really progress the plot. But The Fresh Prince is, and it being in the style of a 90s sitcom is what held it back from anyone actually growing. That's why I am enjoying Bel-Air so much, because I feel as if they have taken these amazing characters from the original and putting them out to their full potential. Thank you guys so much for watching. It feels good to be back in my old format. I really genuinely do enjoy it. You guys are great. I really do hope you all enjoyed that, and I hope you guys actually listened to what I had to say, because like I said, the 90s one is still good. I can only just handle it in doses for the sake of the algorithm, and simply because I want to know if you watched the video until this point. Comment down below your favorite sitcom that you cannot watch too many episodes of it because you start to get too annoyed with it. I'm genuinely curious, because I remember one of my friends told me that 70s show, and I completely get it. I understood why she said that. A few little announcements. I have Patreon. If you guys want to support me, deeply helps, deeply appreciate it, optional. And then if you want to make a one-time donation, it is Ko-fi. I have that link down below, and I am gonna start doing my commissions, like my little profile picture commissioned through Ko-fi, so be on the lookout. Make sure you follow me over there, get interested in me commissioning me for a profile picture. Completely optional. If you watch this video with the ads on, thank you, that is enough. Follow me on Instagram. That is like really the only form of social media that I really use now. My Instagrams, those will be over there. I am also currently having a sale on all my accessories and do-rags on my website, harryonahook.com. No code needed. The discount will be applied at checkout. That's all you gotta do. It's literally, it's done for you. You don't gotta put in no code. It may say that the item is $15.99, but it's actually not. When you put them in the cart, it'll show you the real price of what it is. But the sale ends on the 23rd. Last but not least, thank you. Thank you guys so much. I literally am glad that I feel so much more comfortable with doing YouTube again. I'm so glad that I just went back to basics, coming here, sitting on the floor, and just talking about whatever crosses my mind. I'm enjoying it. I'm having a good time. We'll see how well this plays out, because I'm excited. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll shut up and leave you alone now. Have a good day, night, or whatever time of the day you're watching. Goodbye.
Now that you see, you should beware of the power of three. They come to fight as fast as they can. They're dangerous yet fabulous. Because the Utonium made them eschew. They are the colors of pink, green, and blue. They'll catch you in the blink of an eye and do it all before bedtime. They coming through and fighting, and everyone they're shocking. You know no one can stop them all because of the chemical X. They coming through and fighting, and everyone they're shocking. You know no one can stop them all because of the chemical X. The Powerpuff Girls will just blow your mind. Buttercup like villains 3 at a time. Bubbles will smile while kicking your butt, and Blossom will lead them out of their rut. Cherish and Powerpuff, 2 of a kind. Both wanna save the world before bedtime. From Townsville, Memphis, New York to LA, the Powerpuff Girls are just here to stay.